Hey everyone, it's Christina Holloway here, and there is my dog Augie who's having a lazy day. Today, we're going to talk about a not so pleasant topic, which is when teams don't get along. So, you could either be in a team that is not cooperating, or you could be leading a team that is not cooperating. Either way, this type of framework is going to help at least diffuse tension and help move you forward in a productive way. I am going to reference two articles. One is a study. I'm going to put a link down below for both. The first is a psychological experiment called the Robbers Cave experiment, and it is pretty known, but if you're not familiar with it, it's about two groups of boys around 11 or 12 years old who went on a camping trip. They were not aware of each other at first, and so they went through exercises to bond within their own groups and came up with names and had their own identity. They were introduced to the second group, which they had been unaware of, and then started to do competitive games. And in the competitive games, the boys became very territorial and they started to have conflict. They became very competitive over who was going to win. They would call each other names. They would raid the camps. They just started to behave badly. So there were experiments to see how they were going to diffuse this kind of tension. And eventually, what they ended up using that worked was getting them to work collaboratively on a common activity. So one example was they cut off their water supply. And so both groups of kids now needed to figure out how to work together in order to get enough water so that they could survive camp. But these activities eventually helped reduce tension. And this is the premise of the first article and how we're going to talk about what it means to diffuse conflict when you're working on a team in management. Now, the second article is from Harvard Business Review. Now, this article focuses more on the likability factor, and they came up with 4 different definitions of the type of person who is more likely to get work done and more likely to be a collaborative person. And they've identified them in these 4 definitions. I am including the graphic because I find it really interesting, but the graphic is here, and let me just take you through it. So on the scale across is about likability. How likable are you? And on the scale up and down is about competence. So how well do you do your job? Now, you could be a competent person who does a really good job, but you could be low on the scale of likability, which means you're not very pleasant to deal with. You're a person who makes things difficult, and unfortunately, you probably feel like you're the smartest person in the room who usually has all the answers. So you're very competent at your job, probably know exactly how you're supposed to do your job, but you're not there to make friends. At the same time, you could very well be a very competent person and also very likable. So we're looking at a lovable star, somebody that everybody wants to work with because not only are they brilliant and they do their job really well, but they're a pleasant person and they usually can draw people to them. They have attractability and they're likely to get quite a bit done, and people just fall over themselves to get on their projects because they're going to have a great time. On the other end of the scale, you could be not very competent, so you barely show up for your job. Now, the difference is, am I an incompetent person that nobody likes? So let's say I have a difficult personality, but I am also not very good at my job. That usually means that I really don't belong there and I'm kind of done with working there and most likely heading out the door. But I could be considered an incompetent jerk, somebody who's not very good at my job but also not really interested in working effectively with other people. And on the other end of the scale is the lovable fool. I am not very good at my job, but I'm a really great person to have around. You like me, I have a great personality, and I obviously try really hard. And also somebody who's always giving feedback, loves to be involved in the meetings and the conversations, but they're just sometimes miss the mark. But you're willing to overlook some of that because they're just so nice and pleasant. Now, here's the difference. The question in the article really has to do with which person would you prefer to work with? The competent person who's a jerk, knowing you're going to get a lot of work done and productivity is going to be high, but morale is not going to be very high either because this person is not pleasant to deal with? Or would you like to have the lovable fool, a person who's not very competent, really makes a big effort, but is also such a great person to have on a team? So the study actually finds that it's the personality and not the competence that makes a difference. You're more likely to want to work with somebody who's pleasant, whether they're competent or not. And you're less likely to want to work with somebody who's a jerk, even if they're very competent and can get the project done. So what does this mean, and what does this have to do with finding a path forward if there's conflict? Okay, so now that we have the factors all figured out, one is, how are we going to find a common goal to go forward, like the Robber's Cave experiment? And the second is, who are you dealing with, competent or incompetent people, and how likable are they? We're now going to move into using an approach or a framework that helps us understand how we can diffuse tensions and move forward with purpose. We do not want conflict or disagreement or ego to get in the way of you having wins or having career advancement. So let's start with the framework. Number one, address the situation. You're going to have to understand, either you're working with people who are oppositional, which is like the Robber's Cave, or you're dealing with people who are having conflict with personality. So are you having personality conflict, or are you having ego conflict? Once you figure that out, you move to number two. Start asking meaningful questions. Now, what's most important in these situations is how you find a solution or how you find a path forward. In this case, you could very well be dealing with people who are oppositional, in which case you do want to start putting ego aside and asking questions to diffuse any kind of conflict related to the ego. And that means making sure you do one-on-one conversations first, so that you can determine exactly where the conflict lies. We don't want to start asking, why is that person bothering you so much? That's not where we're going. We want to turn it back onto that person. So why are you so frustrated? Why are you going up against this person? Where do you feel like you're not being supported? Where do you feel like you're not being heard? Where do you feel like we've acknowledged this other person, but we haven't acknowledged you? Because the reality is, people who are fighting against each other, if it's just two people, they're competing. And they could feel that they've been slighted or left out. If that's the case, you want to start correcting it. And always, always ask the person what they want. Because if you try to offer a solution without hearing what their need is, nothing is helping them. Any solution that you create without their input, they're going to say that didn't help me, because only they know what frustration they're experiencing. Now, if you have a situation where you've identified in this project that you have a couple of competent jerks and lovable fools, then you want to start figuring out where they can get assignments or certain roles on the project that separates them. Competent people are less likely to tolerate incompetent people, even with the likability. So if you have a competent jerk especially, that person's level of standard is going to be so, first of all, unrealistic. They're going to be controlling people, then they're going to be perfectionists, and they're going to continue to say, I have the highest standards, you should all be working at my level. So they're not going to be easy people to deal with. Now, while the solution would be that we'd love to reassign them or get them off our team, as you can see in the Harvard article, it's going to explain it's not always realistic to do that, in which case you want to give them responsibilities that allow them to shine in their area, especially if they're competent but difficult, or they're competent but likable. Competent people should be having some of the biggest, hardest tasks that keep them engaged. If you have incompetent person who's not likable, you got to start giving them responsibilities that keeps them very well contained in their own space. And if you have incompetent people who are likable, there are very likely to be people that you can assign or shadow to someone who's more than happy to mentor them as part of a deliverable for the project. The more likely you are to ask questions and find a solution to move forward according to their needs and where their frustration is, the more likely you're going to be able to diffuse any kind of conflict that arises. And number three, look ahead together. Once you've diffused the conflict, or at least identified where it's coming from, you'll then be able to create a common path forward. So let's say you have two people who are fighting ego-wise, and you're looking at a Robber's Cave situation. They actually needed a common goal in order to come together. So if you're dealing with people who are, maybe they're both competent jerks. So if you're dealing with two people who are competing against each other and constantly oppositional, most likely they're both at very high levels of competence. Neither one of them is inclined to be particularly friendly or agreeable during a meeting, or during a project, because they want to be the shining star. In which case, you're going to have to find some sort of deliverable that helps them move forward so that they're both find value in the bigger win, which is that they can work alongside each other. We don't want to force people to get along, but we do want people to show up professionally and be able to understand how working well together is in their best interest. The more likely you are to communicate to them that any conflict is going to count against you in your performance review, the more likely you can help align them back towards productivity and an ability to move forward. Now, let's say you're dealing with some competent stars that are doing really great work, but you have some people who are on the competent jerk list or the incompetent jerk list, and they keep interfering and they want to be involved in all aspects of projects, even when you've reassigned some of their tasks. In this case, you now also want to start positioning people as, how are we going to move forward from a bigger point of view? Again, the solution works if you're able to start explaining to them how they're aligning it back to performance and accomplishments, especially with work, and how they're going to be evaluated by their behavior as well as their output, and then helping them find a common path forward, which is either you're all going to work together in this one area, or you're all going to start supporting each other, at least at work, because you all have a common goal. One final note: situations like this can arise as well if there's no clear direction and no clear definition of what expectations are for the project. If you are a person who's managing a project or a team, or if you're on a team where you realize that the goals change every couple weeks, the strategic direction had not been defined before you started the project, there was no clear idea who was going to be responsible for what or who was supposed to move forward, you'll end up with some egos who decide, I'm going to take charge. People will fill in empty gaps if they don't understand the path forward. And when that happens, conflict will arise. If you're on a team and you notice that there's no North Star or no clear path forward, you do want to start asking some questions to your boss or the project lead about where we're going and where we can have this documented so all of us can be on the same page. If you're running the project from a project management point of view, you absolutely should already have work plans put in place, roles and responsibilities assigned, and a clear idea of exactly how everybody is going to win at the end of finishing this project. What are we all celebrating? So we would definitely want to be on a project that we know is headed in a specific direction so that when we finish the project, we know how we completed it. We can be evaluated based on our level of completion. Once all of that is determined, you're going to be more likely to be on a team that collaborates and gets along, where they're able to diffuse conflict and people are able to understand their own expectations and the expectations of others. And they have a manager who's more likely to intervene where necessary to provide clarity and not act like a referee during meltdowns or disagreements or complete conflict. You just don't want that, and you don't want to be on a team like that. And that's it for this video on how to deal with conflict on your team. I hope you enjoyed this video and found it valuable. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.